In the reading room of the Tate archive, a well-dressed man sat with a box of old gallery records. He had a reader's card. He had given the Tate £20,000, and he had not come to steal a thing. He had come to leave something behind. Around 120 paintings are still missing. Some of them, tonight, are almost certainly hanging on a wall, as the real thing. Over several years, John Drewe corrupted the archives of the Tate, the Victoria and Albert, and the Institute of Contemporary Arts, not by taking documents out, but by slipping false ones in. By the time anyone understood what he had done, he had, as the detective who had helped arrest him put it, rewritten art history. It began honestly enough. John Myatt was born in Staffordshire in 1945, an art teacher with an unusual gift. He could paint in almost anyone's hand. Give him a Chagall, a Dubuffet, a Giacometti, and he could give it back to you in the artist's own style. In 1985, his wife left him, with 2 young children to raise. Short of money, he placed a small advertisement in Private Eye. Genuine fakes, 19th and 20th century paintings from £150. Copies, sold openly as copies. An honest trade. One customer kept coming back. An elegant man who introduced himself as Professor John Drewe, a nuclear physicist, he said, attached to the Ministry of Defence. Almost none of it was true. He had been born John Cockett in Sussex in 1948 and had taken the name Drewe at 17. He claimed a doctorate he did not have. What can be confirmed is smaller and stranger. He had once been a school physics teacher. Then came the moment that changed everything. Drewe told Myatt that Christie's had examined one of his paintings, a work in the style of Albert Glaze's, and accepted it as genuine, valuing it at £25,000. He offered to split the money. Myatt was in debt. He said yes. From then on, he painted to order. Giacometti, Ben Nicholson, Nicolas de Stael, Chagall, Dubuffet, Graham Sutherland. And here is the strangest part. He was not using the materials of a master forger. He used household emulsion, ordinary wall paint, mixed with KY jelly so that it would dry quickly. Nothing a serious laboratory test would ever mistake for the pigments of the period. Drewe aged the canvases himself, with mud and the dust from a vacuum cleaner. Over the years that followed, Myatt painted close to 200 of them. Because the paint was never the point. The paint could be exposed in an afternoon. What could not be exposed was the paper. Drewe understood something the whole market depends on and rarely says aloud. Buyers do not authenticate the painting, they authenticate its provenance. The paper trail that says where a picture has been and whose hands it has passed through. And paper can be written, so he set about building it. In 1989, he walked into the Institute of Contemporary Arts as a generous collector, donated 2 of Myatt's fakes to a charity auction, and was given the run of a disorganized archive, where he helped himself to letterheads, receipts, and samples of handwriting. At the Tate, the £20,000 gift bought him the same thing. An archivist later testified that in 1991, he used the records of the Hanover and Ohana galleries intensively, and admitted, in court, that a single page could be lifted out while a member of staff stepped away, and returned later, altered. At the Victoria and Albert's Art Library, he signed in with a false reference that pointed back to himself, and walked out with 2 stolen catalogues. With all of it, he manufactured an entire history, receipts, certificates, catalogues for exhibitions that had never taken place, new pages slipped inside genuine ones from the right decade. He invented a company, Art Research Associates, whose only real purpose was to vouch for John Drewe. And he recruited people to play the former owners. One friend signed papers as the owner of a fake Nicholson. Another was told the money was going to buy Holocaust archives out of the Soviet Union. Here was the flaw he had found. An archive is built to stop people taking things out. It is not built to stop a man putting things in. If you look at the paper as closely as you look at the painting, subscribe to Provenance. Every masterpiece has a past, and we spend our time in the archives where those pasts are quietly made and unmade. It worked, and it scaled. The fakes moved through Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips, and through dealers in London, Paris, and New York. A false Giacometti, standing nude, 1955, was sold to a New York dealer, Armand Bartos, for $175,000. A single fake Nicholson fetched almost £30,000 at auction. By his own estimate, Myatt made around £275,000 from the whole affair, though at the beginning, Drewe had paid him as little as £250 a canvas. In total, the scheme is thought to have brought in somewhere between £1 and £2 million. The first crack did not come from a laboratory. It came from a woman in Paris who looked at a painting and simply felt that it was wrong. Mary Lisa Palmer ran the association that authenticates the work of Alberto Giacometti. Shown one of Myatt's nudes, she distrusted it, and instead of arguing about the canvas, she went looking through the paper. In the Hanover Gallery albums, held in the Tate's own archive, she found a photograph of that standing nude. It was too sharp. It had been printed on coated paper, a paper that did not exist until the 1970s, and it was sitting inside an album from the 1950s. Someone had opened the record of history and slipped a new page in. She was not alone in her doubt. In London, the dealer Peter Nahum bought a Nicholson, grew uneasy, and went to the police. At the Tate, the archivist Jennifer Booth followed her own suspicions, generous donor or not. And in a courtroom, Françoise de Stael, the widow of Nicolas de Stael, stood before one of the paintings and said, quietly, that it was not from the hand of my husband. But the thing that finally brought Drewe down was not an expert. It was a marriage. For 15 years, his partner had been a woman named Batsheva Goodsmid, the mother of his 2 children. When Drewe left her for another woman, she gathered up the documents he had left behind in the house and handed the entire forgery kit to the authorities. Everything he had built to look like history was now evidence against him. In September 1995, Scotland Yard arrested John Myatt in Staffordshire. He confessed almost at once and became a witness for the prosecution. The following April, officers raided Drewe's house in Reigate and found forged certificates and the 2 catalogues stolen from the Victoria and Albert. The trial opened at Southwark Crown Court in the autumn of 1998 and ran for about 5 months. Drewe dismissed his own barrister and defended himself, insisting he was really an intelligence agent, a scapegoat in a secret arms deal. The prosecution called it pure fantasy. The jury took 6 hours. Guilty of conspiracy to defraud, of forgery, and of theft. In February 1999, John Drewe was sentenced to 6 years. He served 2. Myatt was given 12 months and served 4 in Brixton. One of the recruited owners was acquitted, and then the story turns in a way no one could have scripted. The first person to commission a painting from John Myatt after his release was the very detective who had helped arrest him. £5,000 for a portrait of the officer's own family. The lawyers from the case followed. So did other detectives. Today, Myatt sells genuine fakes, quite legally, signed and labelled as fakes, from around £700. Drewe did not reform. In 2012, at Norwich, he was sentenced to 8 years for cheating a retired music teacher, 71 years old, out of £700,000. The judge called him about the most dishonest and devious person I have ever dealt with. Remember the man in the reading room, with his card and his box of records? Of the paintings he sold, only about 60 have ever been traced. Around 120 are still out there, and no one knows how many false pages still sleep in the files that the art world reaches for whenever it wants to prove that something is real. He never forged the past by hiding it. He forged it by adding to it. Every masterpiece has a past. He simply wrote a few of them. Next time on Provenance, we follow another one, and the money that tried to erase it.